Hello everyone. There's a party going on upstairs because it's a new year and apparently I'm not invited. I mean to the party. Clearly I'm invited to the new year because that's how calendars work. Even though I'm not invited to the party, they are still sharing the music with me. I don't really want to hear it, especially since it's mainly just the bass. I must be watching too much Davey 504 because I want to slap something now. Thankfully, I can now bend reality to my whim and have this speech to text make an audio file for me when I can't actually record it without getting a copyright strike. Anyway, on to the point of the video. If you've studied philosophy for any length of time, you'll know that the idea of a simulated universe is quite common. It used to be that the question was whether you could differentiate between a dream and reality. But as technology improves, we ended up with movies like The Matrix, which came out in the late 90s. I want to say 1999. Please don't fact check me. I don't think I can handle being wrong already this year. Anyway, once The Matrix came out, then the idea of computer simulations began to become more mainstream. But the more that computers evolve, the more powerful what they can produce becomes. And that means that the lines between reality and simulation will become more and more difficult to differentiate. The truth of the matter is that, were I not a theist, specifically if I was not a Christian, I would actually argue that the universe we inhabit is much more likely to be a simulation than for it to be a quote-unquote real universe. The main reason I do not hold to that belief is because I am a dualist, which is to say that I believe the soul is not just the workings of the physical brain, but that there is something else going on, which is what we call the mind. This mind, whatever else it is, exists immaterially, and it is the reason why we will never actually have sentient AI. However, if it turns out that my belief in dualism is incorrect and that the mind really is just what the physical brain does, then in that case we are very rapidly approaching the level of technology wherein we can physically reproduce the entirety of a human mind. Not in physical space, although that probably is just a few decades away. I mean within a virtual realm. If the mind is produced by the electronic impulses guided through logic gates of our neurons, then that same mind would be produced by the electronic impulses guided through logic gates on a computer chip. The physical activity would have the same effect and the mind would be produced. Human brains are not infinitely complex. They are complex, yes, but they are finite structures. It is within our capability to reproduce all the network that is physically within the brain virtually inside a computer. And once we are at that level of technology, it is trivially easy to duplicate that same network in another place, another computer. We can transfer files to the cloud, diffuse them through the entire world, recreate that same mind in multiple places. Each one would be self-contained within the confines of a partition on a computer. Absolutely none of them would be conscious of anything outside of the programmed reality, because at that point, the mind itself, the thing that is experiencing what it thinks is physical reality, does not need objective physical space. It only needs to have data input into the computer to simulate it. And at that point in time, the mind that is experiencing the simulated data would behave the way it does because of the network coded into the programming. That mind may perceive that it exists in a world where colors are specific wavelengths of light, where sounds are vibrations within physical space, where gravity exists. Yet all that really needs to happen is there only needs to be the network that creates that mind. The body need not be real at all. This used to be the stuff of just science fiction, but with the advancement of AI and the blurring of the lines as AI gets trained further and further, the more likely it becomes that this simulation is possible. Again, under the assumption that dualism is false. We can put it this way: if dualism is true, there is only one mind which is rightly called my own. But if dualism is false, if the mind is really just the physical network that can be duplicated, then there can be multiple copies of this same mind stored in various locations. We have seen how, as human beings, we inevitably seek out and create simulations. If computers can simulate the mind, it's preposterous to believe it has only been done once. If a mind is ever synthetically produced, then we can bank on that same mind being cloned time after time after time. But suppose it has only been done once. Even just once, that means that the mind I currently have, this mind, only has a 1 in 2 chance of being the real mind. But what is meant by the word real in that sentence? If the simulation is accurate enough, and if dualism is false, both minds are equally real. But only one exists in the physical world based on the biology, the other does not. Even under the assumption that there is only one copy of my mind out there, this gives me a 50-50 shot that the mind I think is in the real world actually is in the real world. The other 50% chance consequences that the mind I think is in the real world actually is in the virtual world. While it's impossible to biologically clone me perfectly, we can reproduce computer programs up to the storage space of the computer we are using. There could be billions of identical minds. The odds that the mind that is currently thinking the thought I am expressing being the one mind that is biologically based and not one of the billions of potential virtually based minds is billions to 1 against. Which is why, if dualism is false, mathematically it is nearly certain that the mind that does the perceiving we perceive does so inside a simulation of some kind. Which brings up a rather interesting problem when dealing with questions like the problem of evil. Suppose that I exist completely within a simulation. The other simulated minds do not actually exist physically any more than I do, but I perceive that they do. I perceive that some simulated minds commit actions which I would consider to be evil against other simulated minds. But those simulated minds never actually existed biologically. They were just data on the hard drive of a computer. What evil has been committed? Can virtual entities with no real existence actually commit evil? Consider, for the sake of argument, that all of us exist on the hard drive of a bored alien teenager who started off this simulation 15 minutes ago, but our experience of time makes it feel like billions of years have passed since the command run was entered. Is the teenaged alien to blame for, say, the Holocaust happening? It only happened because of his programming, but what happened is just logic circuits on a chip which created a self-aware mind. And the irony is that the activity which is perceived as mental information isn't even designed for that purpose. Just as the physical brain has no concept of what a red balloon is when you imagine one, the hardware this alien used has no concept of what a Holocaust is. In fact, what if it turns out that the perception we got of the Holocaust having happened just is what physical processes required to happen so a chip can calculate the 53rd digit of pi when run through a logic gate built with alien compounds on some teenager's version of MATLAB? These questions aren't relevant if dualism is true, but if the mind just is what physical processes do, then whence then is good or evil? Where is morality? Where is reality? What is true and what even matters? Oh yeah, Happy New Year.